Drake is arguably the biggest rapper in the game. Love him or hate him, he has been one of the most consistent and hottest artists since the early 2010s. And one key thing acts as the backbone to all of Drake's success: the iconic, genius production behind his songs. So in today's video, we're gonna take a deep dive into all the genius production techniques used across Drake's best beats and create our own Drake-inspired beat with a crazy switch up at the end. So sit back and get ready to go into the moody, infectious world of Drake's production. Drake has been running the game for over a decade, and although some of his biggest hits in recent years have been leaning more towards the trap side of things, my favorite style of Drake's super versatile production are those vibey R&B beats. We'll get into some more hard-hitting trap stuff later on in this video, but for now, I want to get into that classic underwater Drake R&B sound that he's most known for. I think Drake is at his best on those late-night, moody R&B kind of beats. Those kind of beats that make you just want to drive down in the city at 3 in the morning thinking about your life. Songs like Marvin's Room, Jungle, Teenage Fever, and my personal favorite Drake song, Do Not Disturb.
Yeah. Styling, no.
I don't know about you, but I could listen to this song on repeat for hours, and I think the reason I love it so much is that crazy, angelic, emotional vocal sample from Snow Allegra. Take a listen to the original Snow Allegra song that they sampled on the Drake record.
Silence keeps clouding me, handle my heart.
The original sample sounds amazing, but if you listen closely to the Drake record, you can hear that they only used the vocal a cappella. They didn't use any of the actual music in that song. It sounds like they just took the a cappella and then built their own melody and chords around it. So that's exactly what we're gonna do today. I find that oftentimes producers compose a whole idea and then try to fit a vocal sample on top of everything they've already made, and sometimes this can just make it sound kind of forced, like it's not supposed to be there. So one thing I've been loving to do is to actually start with the vocal and produce around that vocal to make something that perfectly fits and complements that vocal. So first thing we need to do is find a vocal sample. Luckily, I've been working on a ton of brand new vocals for my upcoming kit, Melody Mastery, which I'll give you some free sounds from that in a second. Anyways, I dug through the vocal kit in there and I found this hook that I worked on with my vocalist, Shantae Marie, which, by the way, we just won a BMI award together. So she's crazy with the vocals.
Thoughts got me twisted. I'm overthinking, how did I get here?
Now, one of the most important parts of the vocal samples in Drake's tracks is how they're processed. The vocal sounds great already, but to get that Drake kind of effect, we need it to sound more warped. And to do that, we're gonna mess with the pitch and also the speed of the vocal. All right, so the first thing that I did is pitch this vocal up 6 semitones, and then we're at 146 BPM right now with the original vocal sample. So to get that warped, kind of like fluttery Drake R&B vocal sample kind of sound, you want to speed your vocals up. So it's great to start with vocal samples that are around 120 to 140 BPM-ish, and then speed those up to a BPM like 170 or 180 for that Drake R&B kind of tempo. So we're just going to speed this up to 174, and this is what we get.
Thoughts got me twisted. I'm overthinking, how did I get here?
So now that we got the vocal sounding a little bit more Drake-esque, it's time to build around it. The melody on Do Not Disturb has these super filtered out sign pad kind of chords, and I knew I wanted to go in that similar super filtered out vibey direction. But I also wanted to take some inspiration from some other Drake tracks that use lush chords to build that vibey R&B kind of feeling.
Cups of the rose. Bitches in my old phone. Presidential suite on deposit. Elevator up to the room. Shower up and then.
These chill synth chords really fit that Drake vibe perfectly, and if you watch this reel by Des Wright, who actually produced the melody on Love All, you can see that he uses a Prophet 10 synth for the main chorus. And luckily, I just picked up a Prophet 10 myself, so I had to try it out for this video. I feel like one of the things that makes Drake's music sound so good is the quality of sounds that are being used. So instead of just grabbing a digital VST synth that sounds kind of cheap, I wanted to use the real thing to get that warm analog texture. I messed around on the Prophet for a little bit and found a pad preset that I liked, and then to get it to sound a little bit more Drake-esque, I turned down the cutoff knob, which is pretty much just an EQ rolling off the high end to give it that underwater Drake kind of effect. And once I got the preset sounding good, I played in these chords. By the way, if you want some free sounds and loops that I made using my Prophet 10 and a little teaser for my upcoming melody mastery kit, I'll put the link in the description and you can go download some of those sounds 100% for free. But anyways, once I had the Prophet pad down, I went into the Melody Mastery Analog Lab Bank and layered it in with another sine pad. At this point, the base of the melody was done, but I feel like a lot of the beauty behind Drake's production is in the subtleties. Unlike artists like Travis Scott and Kanye West who have these crazy OD beats with tons of different sounds and crazy production coming in and out, Drake's beats are usually very simple. They don't have a ton of sounds, but the processing and sonics of each sound really give it that Drake kind of feeling, build the world of his production. And a lot of that iconic Drake sound that we all know and love comes from Noah 40, Drake's right-hand man in the studio. Him and Drake changed the game with their underwater R&B kind of sound. By having Drake's beats sound like they're underwater, they created a ton of space for Drake's vocals to shine, and it gave his songs a completely unique sound compared to everyone else's. And right now, the melody that we're working on sounds great, but it's too bright and it's too in your face. So by taking off some of those high-end frequencies that are in the melody we're making, we're gonna in turn create some more space in the high frequencies for an artist's vocal. And most people recreate this effect by just taking an EQ and rolling off the high end, but Noah 40 himself says that this is not how he does it.
People usually assume that it's a low pass filter and then I'm just rolling off all the top end, but for the most part I'm actually degrading the sample rate, so I'm removing those frequencies from the top end. They're not even getting sampled in the first place.
So essentially 40 is just decreasing the quality of the audio file so that the high-end frequencies don't even exist in the audio file. And the best plugin that I've found to do this is Decimort 2, which just reduces the sample rate and gets rid of all those high-end frequencies so they never even exist in the sample in the first place. So I added this plugin to the vocal in both of our synth pads, turned up the input knob a little bit just to get a little bit more saturation and add some grittiness and dirtiness to it. And then I added some reverb and delay to make it a little bit more ambient, because if you want that late night vibey kind of sound, you need it to sound ambient. Finally, one crucial part to Drake's sound is pitch shifting. So I pitch shifted our whole melody down 6 semitones, which really give it that late night driving around at 3 a.m. kind of feeling. Take a listen to before and after.
Thoughts got me twisted. Thoughts got me twisted.
Thoughts got me twisted. I'm overthinking.
Now, this sounds super good already, but I wanted to create a B section where the vocal kind of chills out a little bit, because right now it's super busy and there's not really that much space if an artist was going to actually try to sing or rap over this. But really quick, before we get into that B section, which turned out crazy by the way, if you're watching this video early after it releases, I'm doing 50% off all my kits right now for Christmas. So click the first link in the description if you want to check out all my kits for 50% off. The discount will already be applied. And as a bonus, as a thank you for watching this channel, you can use the code DRIZZY at checkout, DRIZZY, for an extra 30% off on top of that 50%. And that discount code will work forever. So if you're watching this video after the Christmas sale ends, you can still get some of my kits for a discount using that code. Again, it'll be the first link in the description. But anyways, back into that spaced out B section. A formula I see again and again in Drake songs is having a more busy and prominent vocal sample in the intro that's super ear grabbing and catchy. But once the beat comes in and Drake actually starts rapping or singing, it filters out and creates a ton of space for Drake to be the star of the show. And you can hear a great example of this on Too Much.
Don't think about it too much, too much.
Done saying I'm done playing. Last time is on the outros.
I love how the vocal is still in the beat whenever Drake is actually rapping, but it's been pitch shifted, warped, and filtered, and created a ton of space for Drake to shine. So I did the exact same thing to the vocal on our beat. All right, so the first thing I did was bounce down the vocal with those effects, and then I took that whole audio file and reversed it to get that reversed Drake sound effect. And then to make it sound even more different, I time stretched it to be double as fast, and then I also pitched it up an octave. And after that, you get this, which sounds cool already, but we're going to enhance this a little bit more. The next thing I did was throw on this Cymatics Deja Vu plugin to give it a halftime effect. And then I layered in the halftime vocal with the higher pitched vocal to kind of fill out more of the sample. And those two together sound like this. And then finally, I added some super harsh filters that are taking out a lot of the high end, a lot more reverb, and then also this ring shifter plugin, which is kind of just panning stuff left to right and also modulating the EQ. And with all that, you get this. Next up, I played those same chords from earlier on a less filtered preset from the Prophet 10 just to kind of give this part some more energy. And then I also added some ear candy with some piano top lines, which you can hear on a ton of Drake records. And I also added a synth run from my Moog Matriarch analog synth. And after all that, we get this. It's sounding great, but it's missing one key thing to just kind of tie and glue it all together. A synth bass. By far, my favorite synth bass in Drake's discography has got to be the one on Teenage Fever.
Your heart is hard to carry after dark.
I love how in the beginning of that bass sound, it's got this super punchy, distorted kind of attitude, but then it kind of chills out into a more simple, usable bass sound. So I knew I had to recreate that. And I did so using my Behringer Poly D synth, which is great for these analog kind of basses. But just to help you guys out a bit, I thought it would be cool to show you how you can make a bass like this inside of a VST, since I know that everyone doesn't have a real analog synth laying around. So let's go into the computer and show you that. All right, so I have this Mini V VST from Arturia, which I'm sure a lot of you guys also have. And the initial preset sounds like this. Right? So that's not quite what the Teenage Fever bass is sounding like. So the first knobs that I want you to look for on your synth plugin are the cutoff frequency and this contour knob. On some synths, it's called something different, but essentially what this does is it adds that punchiness. So we're going to turn the cutoff pretty low, so we get something closer to that, right? A more deep synth bass. And then we're going to turn this contour knob up all the way, so it adds like that really like mean analog synth kind of like bitey sound. You know what I mean? Maybe a little less. And then you also want to make sure that the attack is pretty low. You don't want a high attack time that makes it like fade in like that. And then to make it sound a little bit more interesting, I'm going to turn up this filter emphasis, which is a resonance knob. Just a little bit. And then just to take it to a little bit of a better level, we're going to go to the chorus plugin right here inside of the VST. This is just going to kind of give the sound a little more life. Nice and subtle, something like that. And after messing around for just a little bit, you should get something like that. So essentially, I did pretty much the same settings on my synth, and I put down this bass line following the chord progression. That bass sounds great, but it felt like it was just missing a little bit of low end and a little bit of fullness. And since I didn't want to add an 808 to this beat, I really needed that bass to fill out the low end so that the drums hit hard. And instead of just boosting the low end on that synth recording with an EQ, I wanted to use two basses together. I loved the analog texture and character of the bass that I just played, but I wanted that body and fullness that digital VSTs kind of have. So I took a super simple sine wave and played it in a very, very low octave following the bass line to just fill out those super low sub frequencies. That's sounding perfect, and we're about to get into the drums, but I wanted to add one more section of the melody with some more synth leads. And going back to Teenage Fever, you can hear that there's this super interesting lead synth kind of sound that kind of sounds like it's a synth crying through a guitar amp is the best way I can put it. So I recreated that by playing a lead on my Prophet 10, which by itself sounds super dry and nothing like Teenage Fever. But the real magic comes in with the processing. The first thing I did was add reverb to make it more ambient and vibey. Then an EQ to clean it up a little bit. Then the real sauce is I added a guitar amp plugin from Logic to get that amped synth kind of sound. Added some H delay for some analog echo, and finally some compression. And the full before and after is crazy. Like I said, it's not the amount of sounds in the beat, but more the quality of the sounds that you're using that makes stuff sound great. Finally, to finish off the outro, I wanted to add one more synth lead, and I loved the bright synth lead that you can hear on Peak off of Scorpion. So I hopped back on the Prophet 10 and played in this lead for the outro. It's time to get into these drums. Make sure to stick around for a while because we're gonna get into some hard-hitting trap Drake stuff next. But anyways, if you listen to a lot of these deep cut R&B Drake songs, a good amount of them follow a similar formula when it comes with the drums. Just two drum sounds, a kick and a snare or some kind of rim shot.
Never had a lot, this is all I need. Never thought I'd be talking from this perspective, but I'm not really sure what else you expect.
So I added a super simple kick and rim shot pattern to our melody and got this. And one cool little technique that I used to make that pattern just a little bit more interesting is I deleted the last snare and replaced it with a kick. And you can hear this technique used on Pound Cake where they deleted the first snare hit, which just gives the beat a crazy bounce, even though it's only got two drum sounds. This beat is legendary, but super simple. And in an interview with Boy Wonder, the producer of the track, he talks about how that simplicity is exactly what Drake wants.
One thing I actually learned from him, I used to put like a bunch of sounds in my beats, and he's like, I like this beat. He's like, well, take this off, take this off, take this off, take this off. And he actually taught me like less is more.
So we could definitely leave the drums like this and keep them super simple for the entirety of the beat. But for the purpose of this video, I wanted to do a second section just to give you guys some more sauce. And for this little drum switch up, I wanted to do it on that synth outro kind of section to just make it feel like it had a different energy than that first section. For these drums, I wanted to take inspiration from another bounce that Drake uses in his beats all the time, the half speed bounce. Essentially, the snare plays half as fast as it normally would, like it does in the drums we just made, which gives out this super slow, spaced out R&B kind of feeling. And you can especially hear these kind of drums all over Drake's records with Party Next Door.
Girl, I can't pretend. We gonna have to listen to some. Okay. I can't wait for September. Makes sense now. Shit just got real.
I felt like these slow drums would be perfect for this outro kind of section, and if Drake was on this beat, it would kind of open up and make an opportunity for him to sing instead of just rapping on the beat. So to start out, I put out a super simple kick and clap pattern, playing super slow and spaced out, and I added a little impact snare that hits with every other clap hit just for some little texture. Once I had that, I took some inspiration from the hi-hats on Teenage Fever. I love that bouncy stop and go kind of feeling that they have, so I wanted to do something similar. Found a nice chill hi-hat sound that I felt like fit, and put down this simple spaced out bouncy pattern, as well as a little filtered perk that you can hear in a lot of Drake songs, and we get this for the finished drums. Now don't get me wrong, I love that moody Drake R&B kind of vibe, but Drake also has some hits with that hard-hitting trap sound. And one thing Drake loves to do on his records are beat switches. Songs like First Person Shooter, Knife Talk, Wants and Needs, and even some of his older stuff like Started From the Bottom, 0 to 100, and a bunch of the songs on If You're Reading This It's Too Late. My idea was to take some inspiration from that old classic Drake trap sound, and then pair that with some more modern sounding hard-hitting trap drums. So let's start out with the melody. One recipe that Drake abuses on these old records is having dark, repetitive, chopped melodies.
Yeah.
I especially love that repetitive, chopped piano kind of sound on Energy and Started From the Bottom. So to recreate this, I grabbed a piano starter from my Melody Mastery kit. And then I half sped it to make it a bit more dark, ambient, and repetitive. And once I had that, I knew I wanted to chop it up every single beat to give it that old Drake chopped kind of sound. So I threw that in my sampler, chopped it every quarter step, and then I pitched it up an octave, added some delay and reverb, and you get this. This sounds cool already, but it's definitely a little bit empty. So I went back and listened to the melody on back to back.
Oh man. Oh man.
This melody is dumb simple. It's literally just two chords, a minor chord to a sus2 chord, which the way I like to think about it is it's just one minor chord and you just take the middle note and put it down one note. And that half step difference is what gives it that hard, dark trap kind of energy. So I played that kind of chord progression on a simple preset from the Prophet 10 and got this. Now, another key part to that old Drake diss track kind of era is a dark, deep synth bass. So I opened up Analog Lab and found this deep bass in the melody mastery presets, and it sounds like this. Finally, I wanted to add some more synths to just kind of fill out the melody a little bit and make it not as repetitive. I really like the synth ARP that you can hear on Six God and also the one that you can hear on No Friends in the Industry.
I'll admit it, I'll admit it. No friends in the industry, my brothers been my brothers.
So I went back into the Melody Mastery Analog Lab bank and grabbed this sick synth ARP preset. This sounds dope already, but when comparing it to the sounds of the real analog synths, it just felt like it was missing a little bit of that gritty analog texture. So one thing that I've been doing when I have these digital synths is I take that VST sound and then I run it through my Chroma Console guitar pedal. Essentially, I'm just running that digital VST signal through real hardware with effects like saturation, delay, and all that good stuff to give it the illusion that it's coming from real hardware instead of VSTs. But you don't need an actual physical guitar pedal to do this. You can get a similar effect by adding some saturation and distortion to kind of gritty up your synth sounds. So don't be afraid to add some distortion and some texture to your sounds. Anyways, take a listen to before and after. Finally, to finish off the melody, I added a second synth bass, and this one I used the real synths again because I really love that analog character and color that it kind of gives off. And I wanted to add this bass to just fill out the loop a little bit more whenever that other bass isn't playing, but I wanted to use it more as a texture layer instead of using it as an actual full synth bass. Because the first bass that we added was super full and deep and was taking up a bunch of the low end frequencies, and if you were to play that with an 808, it would sound terrible. And I wanted this bass to play on top of the 808 at the same time, so I cut out all the low end with an EQ on the synth bass that I recorded to make room for an 808, and I got this. As you can tell, taking out the low end of the bass leaves a ton of room for the 808, but it's still keeping the texture and analog feeling of the bass sound. Speaking of the 808s, it's time to get into the drums, and we might as well start with the 808s. After re-listening to a bunch of Drake's trap songs, I noticed that the 808s are often not super punchy and super hard hitting.
21, can you do something for me? 21. A pigeonhole, I'm a night out, it's a different mode. I'ma have to make a paint.
And I think this actually really helps set his trap production apart from artists like Future or Lil Baby, who use super hard-hitting 808s from producers like Wheezy and Southside. So I grabbed an 808 that hits a little bit more like a sub that doesn't have too much punch, and I put down this simple pattern. As you can tell, combining the high end of that synth bass with the 808 gives off a really cool kind of texture. Next up, I put down a super simple snare and a two-step hi-hat pattern, but to spice up the hi-hats while keeping it super simple, because we know Drake likes simple beats, I first dragged them just a tiny bit off time to give it a little bit more of a human bounce, and then I added 16th note hi-hat rolls, which are a super common roll that you can hear in a bunch of Drake's rap songs.
Niggas, like I'm J. Cole, I could tell her head good before I never took it back. Whoa, no friends in the industry, I had to draw.
So after adding those, we get this. Next up, I wanted to add some more energy with perks and open hats, and one of my favorite producers who works with Drake consistently is OZ, who is known for having some of the craziest bouncy drums.
Look at my history, I'm trying to see what's different from that guy.
So I added a bounce snare and two open hats inspired by OZ's production just to kind of fill out the drums and add a little bit more bounce. And then to tie all the drums together, I added a kick. And just a little side note, kicks sound super good whenever you pair them with these subby kind of 808s that don't have a bunch of punch. Because whenever you use super punchy 808s like a Zaya 808 or a Spins 808, it kind of clashes a bit because they both have so much punchiness and they're hitting at the same time. And it can end up making your beat just kind of feel a little bit off. Anyways, one last thing that's a key part to that old Drake trap kind of sound is a filtered breakdown section.
So they could talk about the timeline and show me.
So to make this breakdown pattern, I added a classic kick and rim shot Drake pattern, which if you don't already know, it's like uses that all the time. And then I added the Decimort plugin that we used earlier in the first beat on top of both of those drum sounds to just filter them out and make them sound like they're underwater. And I put these drums on the parts where that deep synth bass comes in because I feel like that pairs well with that mean underwater kind of feeling. And it kind of breaks up the repetitiveness of those fast-paced drums and adds some more dimension to the arrangement. And after I had that breakdown section, the beat was finished. So real quick, before I play that through, if you enjoyed this video or you learned anything, hit that subscribe button so I can keep making more videos like this for you guys. You guys have been supporting like crazy recently, and I appreciate everyone who's watching my videos. But anyways, let's hear this beat.
Thoughts got me twisted. I'm overthinking. How did I get here? You made me question, what is it all for? What is it all for? I'm overthinking.
That lead is nasty. Little texture to transition it. Hard. Thank you for making it to the end of this one, and as a reminder, all my kits are 50% off for Christmas. You can get them in the link in the description. Use that code DRIZZY for an extra 30% off, even if you're watching after the Christmas sale has ended. That code will still work. But yeah, that's all for me. Peace.